On the day my wife gave birth to the child of her terminally ill first love, my father-in-law and mother-in-law had 10 thugs stationed outside the delivery room. But even when the delivery was over, I never caused any trouble. My mother-in-law held my wife's hand and sighed. "Laura, don't worry. As long as we're here, we won't let him get anywhere near you. Your dad even brought people to guard the hospital entrance. If he dares try to stop you from giving birth, we'll call the police." My wife, pale and weak, nodded slightly but still instinctively glanced toward the elevator. What she saw was nothing but emptiness, and only then did she let out a sigh of relief. She couldn't understand it. All I wanted was to help her leave a legacy for her true love. Why couldn't I just understand her? Looking at the nurse holding the crying baby in her arms, she smiled contentedly. She thought that if I could visit her tomorrow, maybe she would forgive me for all our previous arguments. She'd even let me become the child's father. But what she didn't know was that I had just submitted my report to the United Nations. 7 days later, I would give up my nationality, become a stateless doctor, and never return. Chapter 1. The day Laura left the confinement center. I had just finished my shift at the hospital. As I approached the door, I could hear the sounds of laughter and joy from inside. This child is so beautiful. Her big eyes are definitely her father's best trait. My mother-in-law was happily playing with the baby in her arms, while James came out of the kitchen with a steaming bowl of chicken soup. "I made this soup myself. You're still weak. You need to nourish your body." He sat beside Laura on the bed, gently feeding her, creating an atmosphere of warmth and family. My father-in-law was holding a rattle, laughing so much his mouth couldn't close. This child is really likable, just like her father. Fortunately, it's not that silent Claude. Otherwise, having a dad who's a doctor would be such a headache. My hand gripped the door handle tightly. I remembered when I first met my father-in-law. He patted me on the shoulder and said that being a doctor was an honor for the whole family, saving lives and healing the wounded. He also told me that he was once a doctor himself, and if it hadn't been for an injury from a medical dispute, he wouldn't have retired early. But now, he was saying that doctors didn't deserve a family. I had only taken a year off for further studies, and this family had already become completely intolerant of me. I lowered my head, bitterly tugging at the corners of my mouth. I had been married to Laura for 3 years. She had always said she didn't want children, and I understood that giving birth could be life-threatening, so I never pressured her. I still remembered the day I left for my studies abroad. She cried her eyes out, saying she would miss me. We had talked every day since, sharing our lives. Even our colleagues joked that, despite being married for 3 years, we still acted like a young couple in love. But 1 month ago, when I finally took a leave to come back home, I found Laura with a big belly, standing next to her first love. My thoughts were interrupted by James's voice. "Claude, when did you get back? Why are you just standing at the door?" Hearing him, the others in the room also turned their attention toward the entrance. When my father-in-law saw the resignation letter in my hand, his frown deepened. "How did I ever let you marry my daughter? What a disaster. Now you're quitting your job. Are you planning on living off us old folks? Is this how you're supposed to be a husband?" My mother-in-law joined in the criticism. "You quit your job. You couldn't even keep your golden job. And now you're asking what you're going to do. If you don't work, how will this family survive? Laura's health is fragile, and the baby needs money. Are you going to let the 3 of us starve?" I couldn't help but find this amusing. Whoever's wife and child it is, it's their responsibility to support them. "Claude, what did you say? Don't you have any sense of responsibility?" Laura finally couldn't take it anymore. With red eyes, she shouted at me, and in her agitation, she clutched her chest and coughed violently. If James hadn't saved me from the car accident 3 years ago, I would have died long ago. His parents both died, and now he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Soon, no one will remember him. Why do you always target him? Do you think I'm that dirty, vile woman in your heart? James looked at her with a heart full of pain, soothing her as he turned his gaze toward me. "Claude, you should say less. I know this is all my fault. I promise I'll never show up in your life again. But please don't let me affect your relationship with Laura." "All right." I looked at the 4 of them, united against me, and I felt even more amused. So this was what a real family looked like. Just then, Laura spoke up, her voice cold and stern. "Claude, my patience has limits. If you ever target James again, don't bother coming back to this house. If you want to stay married to me, you'd better be quiet. Next week, at the full-month celebration, I'll announce in front of our relatives and friends that you are the father of the child. Next week." I glanced at the baby, already fast asleep in the stroller. By then, I would be on my way abroad. But before I left, I didn't mind giving them an unforgettable surprise. Without changing my expression, I nodded. "Okay." Chapter 2. After saying that, I didn't care about their reactions. I turned around and went straight back to the bedroom to pack my things. Since I had decided to leave for good, I didn't want to leave any trace behind. The laughter and joy from the living room filtered through the door, and my hands froze for a moment as I folded my clothes. "James, I want to use your surname for this child. That way, even if he calls someone else Dad in the future, he'll always remember that you're his true father. Even though I couldn't see it with my own eyes, I could easily imagine the deep affection on Laura's face when she said this, and my heart was already torn apart, full of wounds. I suddenly thought about the day I rushed back home last month, still holding a souvenir for Laura that I had bought abroad. But when I reached the door, I saw Laura and James, just back from a walk, hand in hand. While Laura's face was filled with fear, James looked at me, confused, asking if I had come to the wrong door. I didn't say a word. My gaze was fixed on Laura's bulging pregnant belly. I had been away for 11 months, and yet, my wife was pregnant. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't deceive myself into thinking that this child could be mine. It wasn't until Laura hurriedly stepped in front of James, introducing us. "This is my husband, Claude." I thought James would back off after hearing this, but instead, like the men of the house, he invited me to come in and sit. As we brushed past each other, he whispered, just loud enough for only us two to hear, "I heard you're quite a bit older than me. Then I'll call you Big Brother, since the child in your wife's belly is mine." My chest burned with fury, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I punched him hard in the face. I completely lost my rationality. The longing from the 11 months I had been apart from Laura transformed into pure rage. If I had a knife in my hand, I might have actually killed this pair of dogs. The neighbors heard the commotion and called the police. We were all taken to the station, but since it was a domestic matter, the police couldn't interfere and let us return home. As soon as we arrived, my in-laws, rushing over after hearing the news, didn't ask a single question and immediately began yelling at me. They scolded me for causing such a scene and embarrassing them in front of the neighbors. They yelled at me for wasting all those years of education, that I should never have raised a hand against anyone. If anything happened, they would never let me off the hook. It turned out that they had known about Laura and James all along, and had even supported their relationship. In just a year, James had become the perfect son-in-law in their eyes. Meanwhile, I had been kept in the dark. I felt nothing but bitterness, my heart heavy with pain. Laura shakily walked over to me, trying to take my hand and persuade me. "I never meant to betray you. James is in poor health, and the doctor says he only has 6 months to live. I couldn't bear to see him die without a legacy. I thought about talking to you about it before, but you were abroad, and I didn't want to trouble you or delay your studies, so I decided to wait until you came back to discuss it. If you're willing, could we raise this child together?" Having a child was such a huge decision, but it sounded so casual coming from her. I packed the last of my clothes into the suitcase just as my mother-in-law pushed the door open. She saw the suitcase at my feet, wearing a look of forced politeness. "Since you've been gone, I've let James sleep in your room. Now the study has been turned into a nursery. Tonight, you'll have to make do and sleep in the living room, or you could stay at a hotel." I was truly exhausted, and didn't have the energy to look for a hotel. I nodded, preparing to settle on the couch for the night, but in the dead of night, the sound of a baby crying echoed from the bedroom. I rolled over, ready to put in earplugs, but then I heard Laura's complaint. "You need to do something about the baby, or he'll just keep crying. You're my baby. Just take care of it. Let the kid cry a little longer. It helps with lung development." Laura lightly laughed and said, "You're so annoying." Then came the sounds of the bed creaking. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying hard to ignore those unbearable noises. But as soon as I closed my eyes, Laura's image from when she first confessed to me flashed in my mind. She had been so pure and beautiful, with her heart and eyes filled only with me, but that version of her no longer belonged to me. Chapter 3. I slept through the night in a haze, and by dawn, I was already heading out with my suitcase. I went to the authorities to deregister my household registration and also handled the necessary procedures for leaving the country. Since I had government-approved documents, everything went quickly, and the staff didn't ask too many questions. Just as I was about to leave, the staff member suddenly called me back and handed me a piece of fruit candy. "May your wishes come true." I smiled at her reassuringly and, after leaving, I found a nearby hotel. Once I dropped off my luggage, I was about to go out for a bite to eat when I unexpectedly ran into Laura, James, and their 2 kids. James was wearing a custom-tailored Armani suit, looking radiant and healthy, with no sign of a man who was about to die. "Claude, I saw you from a distance just now and thought it was you." Laura was saying it couldn't possibly be you here. His gaze fell on the recruitment flyer in my hand, and a knowing smile spread across his face. "Claude, so you're out here looking for a job, but with your frail body. Aren't you just going to make yourself suffer carrying bricks on a construction site?" I didn't respond. The flyer had been handed to me by a young girl on the street just a moment ago. I had seen her handing out leaflets in the cold winter, so I casually took one from her. When I didn't say anything and just clenched the flyer in my hand, James's laugh grew even more mocking. "If you'd said you were looking for a job earlier, maybe I could have helped out. We're all family, right? If you're doing well, Laura's future will be secured too. Then I can rest easy. At this moment, my silence was basically an acceptance of what he had said. Laura, who had looked confused before, now had a completely changed expression. She frowned tightly, and her eyes filled with contempt as she looked at me. What's there to introduce? He chose to quit a good job as a doctor. Now, even if he starves on the streets, he doesn't deserve anyone's sympathy. Claude, you really have no sense of responsibility. Do you think this will make me give up on the child? I looked at her familiar face, but at that moment, it felt so alien to me. I remembered when we first got married, when I considered resigning and changing careers due to internal competition at the hospital. Laura had simply held me in her arms, gently patting my back, and whispered in my ear, "We are one. No matter what decision you make, I'll support you. Resigning isn't a big deal. I believe our future will shine. And husband, I'll always be by your side." But the person who promised to always be by my side now stood by, letting another man humiliate me. She seemed to have forgotten the words she once said to me, forgotten the deep feelings we once shared. Even my in-laws were shaking their heads in disappointment. I must have been blind before. How could I have trusted you to take care of my daughter's future happiness? Luckily, we're still alive. If we weren't here, I can't imagine how you would have tortured our daughter when we're gone. They went on exaggerating their words, and the passers-by started to glance over at us. My hands, hanging by my sides, slowly clenched into fists. Just as I was about to speak, James suddenly stepped forward. "We're going to take a family portrait. Claude, why don't you join us? In the future, I'll rely on you to help take care of Laura and the child." Laura immediately interrupted him with a disdainful sneer. "Look at his shabby appearance. If he's in the photo, it'll only lower our family's image." She then turned her head and headed toward the photography studio, urging James to follow quickly. "Since that's the case, we'll leave first. Don't let us delay you from finding a job." James gave me a meaningful pat on the shoulder. Watching him leave, I felt no emotion stirring inside me anymore. To outsiders, this was such a harmonious family. If this was what Laura wanted, then what was wrong with me stepping aside and letting go? Chapter 4. 3 days before my departure, I received a message from the director. He said that the expert I had asked him to contact for me was in the country attending a forum, and he could help check my father-in-law's coronary artery disease. My father-in-law had always had heart problems, and several years ago, he was even rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. So, while I was abroad, I had asked my colleagues to help gather some relevant case studies for me. After all, the bond of years was still there. Once I helped with this, I would owe them nothing. But when my father-in-law heard that I wanted to take him to the hospital, his face instantly darkened. "Why go to the hospital? Do you wish for me to drop dead? I had heart bypass surgery, and it was successful. What's there to check? There's a top heart specialist in the country today. You could go see him. Maybe do some preventative measures for the future." Before I could finish, my father-in-law smashed his water cup at me. "You're the only one who knows how to sweet talk. Do you think you can just call up a top expert as an unemployed person? All you do is boast." Do you remember James? He stayed up late just to help me book an appointment with an expert. Where were you then? He kept comparing me to James, and his attitude made everything clear. No matter what I did, it was wrong. No matter how I tried, it would never measure up to James. When this thought crossed my mind, I could only bitterly smile. "Since you don't want to go, forget it. Let it be." It was just me meddling in things that didn't concern me. Soon, it was the day of the baby's full moon celebration. I arrived late and saw the banquet hall filled with relatives whose names I couldn't even remember. For a moment, I felt dazed. This scene was even grander than my own wedding with Laura, and right at the entrance to the banquet hall, they had posted a family portrait of the 5 of them. As for me, from beginning to end, I was just a joke. When relatives and friends saw me walk in, they immediately started whispering, and even without hearing them, I could guess what they were saying. Soon, my aunt grabbed my arm and greeted me. "Claude, when did you come back? Laura didn't mention it at all. I heard you just came back from studying abroad and are about to be promoted to chief physician at the hospital. Your future looks so bright." I didn't respond, only nodding slightly in polite acknowledgement, but I could clearly see the disdain in their eyes. After all, I wasn't in the family portrait, and the person who had been with Laura the entire time wasn't me either. Someone nearby, who seemed to be in the know, pointed at the man feeding Laura dessert and asked, "Claude, who's this guy? I didn't know you had a younger brother." I gave a faint smile. Laura's new husband. The aunts, who were all eager for gossip, immediately widened their eyes and then huddled together, whispering even more. Since Laura's family didn't care, why should I help them cover up the truth? At that moment, Laura walked up to the stage and took the microphone. "I'm so happy that everyone could join us for my son's full moon celebration. Before this, I never thought I would become a mother. I always felt like I couldn't play the role of a mother successfully, but the moment I heard my baby crying in the delivery room, I realized how powerful a mother's love really is." Her words were impassioned, as if she were about to cry from her own emotions. My aunt, standing next to me, yelled, "Let the father of the baby say a few words. Where is the father?" The atmosphere in the banquet hall froze for a moment. All eyes shifted back and forth between James and me. The answer was already clear, but my aunt seemed to be waiting for Laura to admit it herself. I met Laura's gaze and slowly walked up to the stage. With a stunned look on her face, I took the microphone from her hand. "What are you doing? I warn you, don't say anything reckless, otherwise, we're not done." Panic flashed in her eyes as she pulled at my sleeve and whispered a warning, but I didn't even glance at her and pulled my hand away. If she hadn't done anything wrong, why would she be afraid of me knocking on the door of truth? At the same time, I spoke calmly into the microphone. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming to today's full moon celebration. The relatives here are the ones who saw Laura and me enter the marriage hall together after our wedding. I always cherished your blessings, but as you came in earlier, you must have seen the family portrait at the door." Hearing this, Laura's face immediately changed. She scowled and rushed toward me, trying to snatch the microphone away. I swiftly dodged and gripped the microphone tighter, continuing, "To be honest, I was shocked when I saw it too, but what shocked me even more was that, after spending a year abroad, I came back to find my childless wife was already 8 months pregnant. I can't swallow this. Laura, let's get a divorce." Chapter 5. I pulled out the divorce agreement that had been prepared long ago and threw it forcefully at Laura's feet. This was something I had been wanting to do ever since I saw her getting close to James. Laura's face turned ashen. She tried to take the microphone to control the chaotic atmosphere, but at the same time, she reached out to grab my arm, wanting to explain things to me. "Claude, why can't you just let it go? Haven't I told you? As long as you stop bringing it up, we three can live a good life together from now on." 3 people. In her version of the 3-person family, I was the one who wasn't welcome, and honestly, I didn't want to deceive myself any longer. "Sign it. There's nothing more to say between us. I wish you both happiness." Laura shook her head vigorously. "I won't sign it. I don't agree to the divorce." "Claude, don't even think about it." When I first contacted the lawyer to draft the divorce agreement, the lawyer had told me that I could ask Laura to leave with nothing. After all, she had openly had a child with another man during our marriage. This was the perfect evidence of infidelity. But gathering evidence and waiting for a court ruling would take too long. I was about to leave the country, and no matter how much money I had, there was nowhere I could spend it. So, I simply took the share of the property that rightfully belonged to me and entrusted the lawyer to donate everything to the Hope schools in the mountainous regions after I left. There was nothing more to discuss with Laura. I glanced at the chaotic scene and turned to leave, but Laura, unwilling to accept it, handed the child over to my father-in-law and was about to chase after me. However, before she could take more than a few steps, James suddenly clutched his chest and gasped for air. "Laura, I feel terrible. Maybe it's from all the stress earlier. I think I'm really close to dying." "James, are you all right? Hold on. I'll take you to the hospital right now." She could only watch as I walked away with firm steps, thinking to herself that once all this was over, she'd have a proper conversation with me. As long as she didn't agree to the divorce, our relationship would never truly end. With that thought, Laura felt a little more at ease. The group hurriedly rushed James to the hospital, but on the way there, Laura's father seemed to have a sudden increase in heart rate due to the emotional stress. Laura nearly cried in panic, unsure who to comfort first. Just as her father was about to be wheeled into the operating room, they ran into the director and the most authoritative heart specialist in the field. At that moment, Laura didn't care about anything else. She rushed forward and knelt in front of the director. "Please, save my father. His condition is really critical. There was a man named James who previously helped me get an appointment with you. Do you remember him?" The expert looked at Laura for a long while before cautiously asking, "You're Claude's wife, right? He contacted me through the director earlier, hoping I could help check on his father-in-law's condition. I saw your photo on his phone, and I even praised him for being so filial. But I remember he told me a couple of days ago that it was no longer necessary to check. So what's the situation now?" Upon hearing this, Laura froze. Her eyes filled with confusion and shock. They had always believed I couldn't contact top-tier doctors, assuming everything was done by James. But now they realized they had misunderstood me all along. In that instant, Laura didn't know what to say. The director pulled her aside and, with a look of regret, said, "I'm very sorry, Miss Laura. We're about to board a flight to the US for a conference, so we can't participate in the surgery. But rest assured, our medical team is the best in the city, and we'll do everything we can to save your father." After speaking, both of them left one after the other. I later heard from the director about what happened. Laura knelt outside the operating room, and her mother, filled with regret, scolded her. "I always said, even if Claude was shameless, he wouldn't joke about things like this. You didn't believe me, and now look, if anything happens to your father, you'll be the one responsible." Her furious yelling made the baby in her arms cry out loudly. My mother-in-law angrily placed the child on a plastic chair nearby. Stop crying. You cry all day long. If I didn't know any better, I'd think I gave birth to a little emperor. But Laura was no longer paying attention. She slowly pulled out her phone, wanting to call me. Perhaps now, I was the only one who could contact the expert for her father's surgery, but her call wouldn't go through. By then, I was already on a plane heading abroad. I rested my head against the window, watching as the scenery outside gradually receded, until the force of inertia lifted the plane into the blue sky. I felt an odd sense of unreality. From this moment on, I no longer had a nationality. I was dedicating myself to the world. Chapter 6. After more than 10 hours of flying, my companion and I were exhausted when we finally landed. The scene here was in stark contrast to the peaceful atmosphere in China. The place was filled with war and armed forces, and one wrong move could cost a life. While we rested in the car, our team leader began explaining the situation at our destination. At the same time, he handed each of us a gun. He said, "Saving lives is important, but more important than the mission itself is your own life." Those words struck deep within me. Suddenly, I remembered the years I spent married to Laura, when I treated her as my everything. Back then, wasn't she more important to me than my own life? Soon, we reached our destination. On the muddy road, many wounded people sat on the ground, their arms and legs covered in bloodied wounds. I learned that this area had just undergone a bombing. These injured people, whose wounds were horrifying to look at, were actually the ones with the least severe injuries from the disaster. The operating room was full, so they had to be placed on the roadside. At that moment, I cast aside all other thoughts and rushed to help bandage their wounds. This was just the beginning. Over the next few months, every day felt like it was reshaping my worldview. But more importantly, I became more determined in my resolve. I never regretted coming here or becoming a doctor with no borders. Then one afternoon, a colleague came rushing in, breathless, saying someone was looking for me. I thought it was just another patient and was about to step outside when my colleague added, "I think it's someone from back home, a woman." My step faltered slightly, and Laura's face immediately flashed through my mind. Before I could decline, Laura had already entered. "Claude, it's really you." Her eyes were red as she rushed over and embraced me. I could feel her tears on my neck, and I awkwardly pushed her away. I remembered that right before I got on the plane, the lawyer had sent me a message. He told me that the divorce proceedings had been officially filed, and regardless of whether Laura agreed, legally, our marriage would be annulled within a month and we'd be divorced. So now, why was she here? "Laura, we've already divorced. You know, after you left, a lot happened. My father, he passed away." I froze for a moment, completely caught off guard. I hadn't expected Laura's father to have passed away. "I'm so sorry. We didn't believe you back then and thought you were lying." But the one who was lying was James. He never went to find any top-tier specialists. My father's condition was always ignored. If we had listened to you and consulted an expert, maybe he would still be alive. With that, Laura crouched down, covering her face as she cried uncontrollably. I stood there, unmoving, feeling a tightness in my chest. During my month here, I had witnessed countless separations between life and death. I had thought that I had already become numb to it all. But hearing Laura's words still stirred something deep inside me. After all, in the beginning, my father-in-law had been kind to me. "I'm sorry, Claude. I've been looking for you. I wanted to apologize to you in person. I didn't know then that you didn't just leave for no reason, but because you wanted to become a doctor with no borders. That's why I came so far to find you. Please, come back with me. This place is too dangerous. I've already lost my father. I can't lose you too." Chapter 7. I shook my head. "No, I'm not going back. As a doctor without borders, I no longer belong to any country. Where could I go back to? Unless the war ends, and no place remains in need of our help, only then could I return home. Until then, this vast world, any place in it, will be my home. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you, shouldn't have been so self-righteous and had children. Now, I've paid the price. James is in bad condition. The doctor said he might not last much longer." "Claude, how am I supposed to live with the child? You promised me you would protect me for life." I pulled my hands out of hers forcefully. "We're divorced now. Laura, how you live your life from here on out is your business. I've got things to do. It's dangerous here. You should return home." After speaking, I turned to walk toward the camp. "If you don't go back, then I won't either. I'll stay here with you. Whenever you're done with your mission, we can go back together." I didn't want to respond to her words, but just as I had taken a few steps, I heard Laura pick up the phone. It seemed to be from a hospital back home. "What? James is dead? I'm coming back right now. You all must wait for me." At that moment, 2 bombers suddenly flew overhead. Hearing the familiar sound of the engines, I instinctively threw Laura to the ground. Laura screamed, "Claude, are you crazy?" Her voice was quickly drowned out by the explosion nearby. The ground seemed to shake with the blast, and dust from the bombs fell on us. I ignored her shouting and slowly raised my head. quickly assessing the surroundings. Then I scrambled to my feet. Laura, clearly frightened by the sudden attack, remained frozen on the ground. I glanced at her and pulled her up. We need to get inside for cover. I had long since grown used to the life-threatening bombings that were an everyday occurrence here, but for her, this was all new. Her lips trembled. Am I going to die here? I pressed my lips together, remaining silent for a while before responding. I'll have the team leader arrange for someone to send you back later. Don't come back here again. Laura's face was covered in dust as she clenched her phone, remaining silent. Soon, the team leader had arranged for a local person to pick her up. He was driving an old pickup truck and gestured for Laura to hurry up and get in. Before she left, I slipped a couple of bills into the driver's phone and reminded him to make sure she got to the airport safely. Even though our relationship had come to an end, I couldn't just stand by and watch someone die without any help. Laura didn't say anything, seemingly still in shock from the earlier attack. When I turned around again, I only saw her quickly getting into the car. I faintly smiled, almost as though I had expected her reaction. Back at the camp, a colleague walked over to gossip. Is that beautiful woman your girlfriend? She came all the way here to find you. Seems like true love. Huh? Not like my girlfriend, who broke up with me as soon as she heard I was going abroad for aid and found some young stud instead. But hey, how come your girlfriend didn't come back with you? I silently put away my lunchbox and casually replied, she's not my girlfriend. She's my ex-wife. My colleague froze for a moment, then didn't ask any more questions. Quickly, I pushed the matter out of my mind. 2 years later, I had the chance to return home due to an unexpected opportunity. Now, my understanding of medicine had deepened, and this time, my girlfriend was coming back with me. We had met at the camp. She had disfigured herself to protect me, and I promised to take care of her for the rest of my life. Over time, I had come to realize my feelings for her. Perhaps it was fate, seeing how lonely I had been, that had brought this opportunity into my life. This time, I would make sure not to let go of this bond. When I returned to the country, the former director of the Central Hospital personally came to the airport to greet me. He looked at me with a satisfied smile. You've gotten a bit darker and thinner. These past 2 years have been tough on you. His ordinary words made my heart skip a beat. I fought back the tears and opened my arms to hug him. Just as I took a few steps, I saw Laura at a distance, holding a boy's hand. She must have found out through some channel, as she came to the airport to see me. In just 2 short years, she had changed a lot. She no longer looked as bright and beautiful as before. Instead, there was a lot more weariness in her appearance. She didn't approach. I just stood there, expressionless, watching her. My girlfriend, sensing something, took my hand and intertwined our fingers. Is that your ex-wife? Should we go over and say hi? It looks like she has a lot to say to you. I withdrew my gaze and gently shook my head. There's nothing to say. From the moment I walked out of the banquet for the full-month celebration, our paths had diverged. There was nothing left to say between us. I turned my head and got into the car. Not long after we left, I received a message from Laura. Over the past 2 years, she had sent me several messages, but since I hadn't used a domestic phone number, I hadn't received any of them. The message that came just a minute ago contained only 3 words. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen for a long time, then promptly deleted and blocked her. I threw the broken phone card out the window, just as I cast away all the past mistakes and misplaced affections.